Hi, David here, and welcome back to part two of our look at a message from Joseph Salyards to James Padgett, sharing with us some insights into life and spirit for the newly and not so newly arrived. If you've just stumbled on this video and haven't watched part one yet, there is an end card at the end of this video that links to it. But if you want to watch part one first, there's also a link in the video description box down below. We ended part one with Joseph Salyards explaining that when we make the effort to develop spiritually, to develop our natural capacity for love, this becomes a process that snowballs. He described it as a geometrical progression that increases exponentially. He then goes on to tell us that just as soon as the light breaks into a man's soul or mind, and he commences to see that there is a way for him to reach higher things and to expand either his mind or soul, he will find that his desire to progress will increase as that progression continues. And with that desire will come help in such abundance that it will be limited only by the desire of the spirit. His will then becomes a great force in his success, in progressing and working in conjunction with that help that calls it into operation. This progression may be illustrated by the history of the snowball, which started rolling from the top of a hill. As it continues its descent, not only does its velocity increase, but it continually enlarges its form and body by the outside snow attaching itself to the ball. So with the mind or soul of a spirit. As it ascends, it not only becomes more rapid in its flight, but it meets this outside help that I speak of, which help attaches itself to the spirit and, as it were, becomes a part of it. So you see that the great problem is to make the start. And this principle will apply to mortals as well as to spirits, because of the start to be made on earth, the mere fact of becoming a spirit will not halt or in any way interfere with the progress of the soul of that spirit. Of course, this means that a correct start be made. If the start be a false one, or based on things other than the truth, instead of progress continuing when the man becomes a spirit, there may have to be a retracing of the way and a new start made in order to get on the right road. I've mentioned in previous videos that inaccurate beliefs about the afterlife can be a major obstacle to adjusting to life and spirit, let alone making the most of it. A mind full of dogma can be a hard nut to crack. You might think that the experience of dying and finding yourself in a new place should be enough to shake up even the most stubborn mind. But the difficulty is that just like having a body that's getting older, you don't feel any different in yourself. And some people do just struggle to accept that they are no longer in this physical world, because the states they find themselves in just doesn't equate with their ideas about being dead. So having an open mind and being willing to explore, or just ask other people who are already there, rather than being too fixed in your beliefs, can be an advantage. As Joseph Salyards tells us, this applies to the progress of the mind as well as to the progress of the soul. The mind of a mortal learns many things which seem to that mind to be the truth, and which, in its opinion, must lead to progress and greater knowledge. Now, when the earth life gives way to the spirit life, that mind may find that its basis of knowledge was all wrong, and that to continue in the way that it had been moving would lead to increased error, and consequently a new start must be made. And frequently the retracing of that mind over the course that it had followed, and the elimination of errors that it had embraced, is more difficult and takes a longer time to accomplish than does the learning of the truth after the mind makes its correct start. Sometimes the mind of great learning, according to the standards of earthly learning, is more harmful and retards more the progress of that man in the ways and acquirements of truth than does the mind that is, as you might say, a blank, that is, without preconceived ideas of what the truth is on a particular subject. This unfortunate experience exists to a greater extent in matters pertaining to religion than to any other matters, because the ideas and convictions which are taught and possessed of these religious matters affect innumerably more mortals than do ideas and convictions in reference to any other matters. One of the things that is striking about earthly religions is just how intensely people can believe their teachings. And it is this intensity of belief that can be a real obstacle to making progress in spirit. Joseph continues, a spirit who is filled with these erroneous beliefs that may have been taught him from his mortal childhood and fostered and fed upon by him until he becomes a spirit, is, of all the inhabitants of this world, the most difficult to teach and convince of the truths pertaining to religious matters. It is much easier to teach the agnostic, or even the atheist, of these truths than the hidebound believer in the dogmas and creeds of the church. Obviously, what Joseph Salliard says here is with reference to traditional Christianity, which covers a wide range of teachings across the different traditions within that. But the point he makes is one that applies much more widely to earthly religions. When we rely upon belief rather than investigation, we multiply our chances of getting things wrong. One of the curious things about Christianity is that it was originally a spirit religion that made use of mediumship. And sometimes you see echoes of what people learned in the early days. What Joseph Salliard has to say next is quite striking in this respect. There is another law which enables spirits to become, by the mere operation of their natural affections and loves, pure and free from the consequences and evils of their mortal lives. This does not mean that the law of compensation does not operate to the fullest, and that it does not demand to the last farthing. For such is the exactness in the operation of this law, and no spirit is released from its penalties until he has satisfied the law. As you believe, and as many other mortals believe, a man's punishment for the sins committed by him on earth are inflicted by his conscience and memories. There is no special punishment inflicted by God on any particular man, but the law of punishment operates alike on everyone. When a spirit first enters the spirit life, it does not necessarily feel the scourging of these memories. And this is the reason why you will so often hear the spirit, who has recently left his mortal life, assure his friends or sorrowing relatives at the public seances that he is very happy. But after a little while, the memory commences to work. And as the soul is awakened, it then never ceases until the penalties are paid. I don't mean that the spirit is necessarily continuously in a condition of torment, but substantially so, and relief does not come until these memories cease their awful lashings. Some spirits live here a great number of years before they receive this relief, while others move more quickly to obtain it. The greatest cause which operates to relieve these spirits of these memories is love. I now mean the natural love, and this love embraces many qualities, such as remorse and sorrow, and the desire to make amends for injuries done, etc. Until a spirit's love is awakened, none of these feelings come to him. He cannot possibly feel remorse or regret or the desire to atone until love, no matter how slight, comes into his heart. He may not realize just what the cause of these feelings are, but it is love just the same. Well, as these various feelings operate, and he acts in accordance with them, a memory here and a memory there will leave him, never to return. And as these memories in turn leave him, his sufferings become less. And after a while, when they have all left him, he becomes free from the law, and it, as to him, becomes extinct. Now, it must be understood that this is not a work of quick operation, for it may be years, long, weary years of suffering, before the spirit becomes free, and once more a spirit without sin or these memories. This is the way the great law of compensation is satisfied. It cannot be avoided. All its demands must be met until sin and error are eradicated, and the soul is returned to a pure state. So if you ever wanted to know where the idea of purgatory came from, there you have it. In truth, we all go to a place where we can be purged of whatever in our past or in our nature causes us regret or embarrassment. None of us is so advanced that we do not need to go through this process, nor is any of us so degraded that we cannot. When we first master spirit, we are often greeted as a way of settling into things. But the love of those who greet us cannot keep us with them if theirs is a place we are not yet suited to. There soon comes a point when we need to go to wherever we individually belong. If we don't like where we've put ourselves, we then have to decide whether or not we want to change ourselves by seeking help and support and making the effort to increase and develop our capacity to love. Yes, Joseph Salliard tells us that it can feel like a slow, weary process. But keep in mind what he said about the exponential benefits that come from making the effort. The more loving we become, the swifter the rate at which we make progress. Joseph Salyards has one final point to make in this message. He tells us that this gradual release from these penalties does not mean that a spirit is progressing in his journey to the higher and brighter spheres, because even without this torture and torment, he may still remain stationary as to the development of his higher nature, mental and moral. When he has been relieved of these sufferings, he is then in a condition to start towards the progression that I have spoken of. As you are tired, I will stop now, and I will write to you again. With all my love, I am your true friend and Professor Joseph H. Salyards. Now, that isn't as dispiriting as it might sound. What Joseph is saying here is that when we manage to get rid of, purge, those aspects of ourselves that have been troubling us, this then frees us to start working towards living in some of the higher spheres in spirit. Everything is process, and all progress is about understanding the process and then using it. So that was a long message from Joseph Salyards to James Padgett, but I think a fascinating and very useful one. The next midweek video will look at a message to James from a former judge, Frank Syrick. James was an attorney, so quite a few of the people who knew him and want to communicate with him also have a legal background. This is quite useful because although us lawyers might not all start out as the most spiritual people, we are curious about the rules that apply to life in spirit, having spent our lives in this world learning and using the rules that apply here. I think the message we've just looked at is a good example of that. The next video this coming Sunday in the series on divine love will look at a message from Jesus that ties into today's video quite well, because it shows that having been in spirit a long time is no guarantee that someone has made lots of progress. Even for people who have been in spirit for many years, centuries perhaps, the rate of the progress they make can still be very dependent on what they have learned or been taught. It's difficult to go exploring things you've never heard of. So I hope you'll join me for one or both of those. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, as it does help to introduce these messages to others. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.